Are you a borderline racist? That's the slur the liberal media elite hurled at millions of decent, patriotic Brits last night, just hours after Reform UK stormed to a local election landslide.
Other times they sound very almost like old Labour, pro-worker, pro-nationalisation, pro-reindustrialisation. And, of course, at other times, some of them can sound pretty borderline racist and talk endlessly about immigration and the danger of people from other cultures coming in.
How dare you? How dare you smear ordinary people who are raising real, uncomfortable truths about the damage unchecked immigration, legal and illegal, is doing to our country. They're watching their communities transformed without any consent. Their wages are being undercut. Their values are being sidelined. And when they speak up, they're mocked and maligned by men like Andrew Marr, a BBC relic from the Oxbridge Club, tucked away in some North London bubble, latte in hand, lecturing the rest of us from behind a velvet microphone. He doesn't speak for Britain, he speaks at it. Reform UK has surged to a 30% national vote share in the local elections, not because Nigel Farage plays some kind of pantomime villain, but because the Tories betrayed the electorate and failed to deliver. And Labour, let's be honest, have turned their backs on the working classes and instead have embraced the wealthy Oxbridge elites like Andrew. The truth is that Reform is rising because people are fed up of being gaslit, smeared and lied to by the people they trusted this country with. Reform is on the rise, whether they like it or not. And Nigel Farage is now odds on to be the next Prime Minister. But whether or not Farage ends up being PM, one thing is certain: people are waking up.
You know what I find extraordinary about this is we've seen now with Brexit, with Trump 1.0, with Trump 2.0, in Australia you had the voice referendum, this tactic that the left continues to pull out of just calling anyone that they disagree with racist, hateful bigots obviously doesn't work. It alienates people, and yet for some reason they just can't help themselves. They still keep doing it.
The reason they do it is because they can't defend anything that they've done, so they have to label people as racist to kind of box them off and to say we don't have to deal with them. The problem is when the next election comes round, the people you've spent 5 years calling a racist are never going to vote for you. That's what happens.
That's right.
But when you say, like, you know, there's been this great landslide and there's all the rest of it, when you look at the data, it's not there. I'm sorry, it's not. The Reform Party have a less of a mandate than Keir Starmer does, and every person is sat here. Come on, let's go.
Before I give it over to Kai, that is an absolutely ludicrous
No,
statement.
it's not.
The Tories
No, it's
had
not.
an absolute obliteration in their homeland. They're completely toast.
Yeah, I'm not denying that, but that doesn't make the other thing any less true.
They just had a 30%.
I'm sorry, a revolution is not started by three men and a whippet. It's not there. There are huge problems.
I think
people are brushing over these problems that Reform have because you don't want to admit that this is nothing but a reactionary party. These elections proved it. Because where are the
any party that Nigel Farage has led in history?
Well, that tells you everything about Nigel Farage, then, doesn't it?
Interesting about this. Kai is shaking his head at that. That's the most interesting thing that's happened.
You've known since we've been on this show, right, that I've said Farage and Reform cannot be underestimated. And I come from a Labour Party perspective. Frankly, those elections on Thursday were disastrous for the Labour Party and cataclysmic for your
absolutely the other way round. The other way round.
In Runcorn and Helsby, they overturned a Labour majority of 14,000. These are standing results. So the fact that you...
But then, I'm not denying that. I didn't dismiss the victories. My point is, there are other things that we should be talking about within Reform that these results show. They show, for example, they have made no ground in Remain's areas. Everything they've won is Brexit. You know, they've made no real steps to actually opening up to get a wider base that they need to win a general election. That isn't there. This is the conversation reformers should be having.
I want to get back to... Go on, Renee, and I want to come back to something on...
I want to come back to migrants, because this was your point, OK, that we're being gaslit. I read a story this week about a young woman who was raped by a migrant who went back to his migrant hotel afterwards. My immediate thoughts on that were, if he was in a detention centre that he couldn't leave, or if he'd had never arrived in the first place, that woman would never have been raped. And that's what we're dealing with.
Can I just ask you this question? Because this is Andrew Marr's words, but, you know, they're sometimes borderline racist. Is he right?
At times, some of them are borderline racist.
Answer the question, is he right?
You talked about having talked about uncomfortable truths. we can have a conversation about the difficulty.
You can say yes or no.
Migrants being in this country and the issues that brings, but also you can have a conversation about some of the borderline racist things that some of us all think.
Well, that's the thing.
Let's have that conversation.
Hang on. No. We need
right.
to clarify this because he's specifically talking about Reform UK, political party, which I have seen no evidence of racism. There's zero. In fact, otherwise they'd be taken to court, wouldn't they be arrested? Where have they been borderline racist?
In this country, there has been an over-focus on some of the key immigration issues and specifically talking about migrants and illegal immigrants as well in a way that dehumanises them and doesn't contribute to public debate, but actually can seem racist. I think that's fair to say.
The great irony of this is that most people who support reform don't care about race. They care about culture, whereas the left are absolutely obsessed with race. It is the only prism through which that they look at the world, and that is why they smear other people as racist, because they can't think in any other way.
But I think Nigel Farage has done more to destroy parties like the BNP and others that are emerging now than any political leader in modern history.
And to the extent
to see they are even bored, because this is the problem, isn't it? Is that we're constantly told that talking about, and we saw that when Nigel Farage spoke in the House of Commons this week, they had the MP sitting behind him, tutting and shaking his head when he said they are diluting our culture. This is damaging our country, which it is by every single
Culture is the key word.
Our culture is dilapidating. Our jobs at lower wages. Housing is through the roof. Wait lists on the NHS are up.
Yes.
These are all due to mass immigration by Peter's party and your party.
But that's exactly why Peter's argument is completely wrong, because Nigel Farage has actually brought the Reform Party into the mainstream.
No, he's not.
Yes, he has.
He hasn't. I'm sorry, it's still not a mainstream party.
Let me finish, Peter.
Oh,
Some of the things you're saying are, you're telling us that the sky is red.
No, I'm not. I'm actually asking you to realise the sky is blue.
Any reasonable person can see that what you're saying is absolutely
because the problem is you're only looking at the surface issues. We've got to look beyond this, because, yes, people look at things through the reformers look at it as culture. However, the rest of the electorate don't. This is the thing that people have to get into the mind. Oh, yeah, it is. But however, you've got to start changing that conversation. However, reform seem to be running around promising the sky, and yet I've seen no policies, no plans, nothing. It is sticking plastic. It's not 4 years. You've got people running around saying he's going to be the next Prime Minister. They should have something.
Peter, as the mother of a mixed-race child, I am constantly being called a racist because I call these things out, which is palpably untrue. I wouldn't have a mixed-race child. So it just demonstrates that actually it's the weaponisation of language to tell me to shut up.
I totally agree with you, Renee. I mean, this is what... And look, the public are rejecting it en masse, aren't we? We are saying, we don't care. You put all the smears out you like, it's not going to stop us, and it hasn't so far.